Good morning. Welcome, everybody, to NJPAC's virtual Business Partners Roundtable. My name is John Schreiber. I'm the CEO of the Art Center, and it's great to see and know that so many of you are joining us for today's conversation about what is known as the Great Resignation. I want to thank our Business Partners Committee Chair, Joel Sherman, for all his help on a regular basis with this series. And thanks to Atlantic Tomorrow's office and our friends at PNC Bank for sponsoring these roundtables. As ever, as always, there is a tremendous amount going on in our world. And here at NJPAC, and I know in your hearts, we are thinking and praying for the people of Ukraine as they undergo horrific aggression against their country. Yesterday, Ukrainian President Zelensky decreed a daily moment of silence to remember the military, civilians, and children who have died over the past few weeks under assault from Russian troops. I'd like to ask that we observe that moment of silence this morning as well. Please join me as we honor those in Ukraine fighting the good fight for democracy and in memory of those who have been lost. Thank you. Today, we're here to talk about the workforce upheaval many folks are calling the Great Resignation. We've assembled a panel of senior executives to tell us how this phenomenon is affecting their organizations and how they're preparing for what comes next. I'd like you to meet our panel. First, Ernie is Chief People Officer at Audible, the leading creator of premium audio storytelling, and heads up Audible's People and Places team, which encompasses HR, workplace real estate and facilities, and neighborhood making in Newark, which is something that's dear to our hearts, and has previously held executive HR roles at Bloomberg and Lehman Brothers. Welcome, friend. Bob Lockett. Sorry?
So happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me, John.
You're in, babe. Bob Lockett is Chief Diversity and Talent Officer at ADP, the industry-leading software for HR and payroll services. His role encompasses diversity, corporate social responsibility, and talent strategy. He also oversees the ADP Foundation. And Bob's HR career spans more than 20 years across multiple industries. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning, John. Such a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me. It's great to be here with Ann and the rest of the team.
Cool. Sam Cocci is CEO and founder of Untitled. This startup transforms traditional employee training by using mobile games that build ongoing schools. Untitled is used by Audible, ESPN, Hyundai, Madison Square Garden, and RWJ Barnabas Health. And Sam sits on the City of Newark Workforce Development Board. Sam, there you are. Welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me, John.
So just to remind everybody of our timing this morning, this is a 45-minute session. I'll lead a Q&A with our panelists for a half an hour, and then we'll have 15 minutes to answer questions that you will ask from your home computers. You can ask a question at any time by typing it into the Q&A box. You can find the Q&A box when you hover your cursor at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And Bob, Sam, thanks so much for showing up. Let's jump right in. So the first question is this. I will ask Ann to answer first, and then Bob, and then Sam. The question is this: is the Great Resignation real? And if it is, how has it impacted your business?
Thank you, Bob. And so pleased to be here, John, with Bob, and Sam, and the team. So let me just say this: it is absolutely real. And we have just, we are at a critical inflection point for the future of work. And as we all know, over the past 2 years, we have been working from home, and because of technology advances, we have really adapted to a new way of working. But that new way of working has also reduced the friction to change jobs very quickly. You can log off of one computer and log on to another. But I think it goes much deeper than that. I think over the last 2 years, what we've seen at Audible is that, there was a lot of fear. People did not know when this, COVID pandemic would end. And we really saw quite a reduction in attrition over the last 2 years. What we have seen in the last several months is a meaningful uptick in voluntary regretted attrition. People are now feeling braver to venture out. They've also realized that after going through such a frightening time, that they, are thinking about what they want to do with their lives and how they're going to further their career development. So we are seeing people leaving for other opportunities. We're also seeing a really tight job market. And with also the ability for people to find people so much easier through LinkedIn, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, it's just the friction for people to move from one job to another has greatly reduced. And people thinking about their futures and pursuing what they honestly want to do next has never been greater.
Interesting. Bob, what's your take?
Well, I agree with what Ann's saying, John. I do think that there's a view that we have that's slightly different. We view this as sort of the Great Realignment. And what we mean by that is that there's been a tremendous reshuffling of sort of the workforce. While it appears that some of the data might show that people were leaving the workforce, actually they were just moving jobs. So they were moving from one type of job to the next. And I think there was, hires were greater than quits, which also led us to believe that there's more to the story than what we initially thought, because the way the media portrayed it was that there was this great resignation. People were walking out of jobs and going out to be entrepreneurs. Well, the data shows something different. And I have the luxury of working very closely with the ADP Research Institute, and they study all of these things and the economic impact of things on the labor force. So what we found are a few things. One, we know that demand, for talent is greater than the supply of talent, given sort of the generational moves as well. In addition to that, what I believe you've seen is the fact that wages have increased and employee benefits have gone up as well, because now the employees are saying, hey, we want more flexible work. We want all of these things that organizations may have in the past said, you know what, we're not going to do those things. And now we realize that the marketplace is very competitive. So any added competitive advantage that you can gain by offering a unique benefit, higher paying salaries, will be much more attractive to this new workforce. Now, having said that, I do think that companies are really trying to meet the demands of the new worker, which could be hybrid work, more pay, more flexibility, and the like. So you'll see this sort of confluence of things happening, and it's just the period, what I call the period of the employee or the worker. They are demanding much more flexibility, much more time away to say, my life is not just about work, and I have to think about it in the context of sort of this work-life integration that I talk about frequently. So that's where I think we are. So it's really more about a reshuffling. Calling the Great Realignment is the way we would position it.
It's interesting. Yeah, that's a different take that frankly I haven't heard before. It's also it's noteworthy. Audible has several thousand employees, mainly based in Newark. ADP has tens of thousands of employees around the world.
60,000.
60,000.
Roughly about 60,000.
Okay, that's a lot of people to keep track of, right? And Sam, a pretty new business based in Newark. What's your head count, and how has the Great Resignation informed your business?
Sure. Thanks, John. Yes, 30 employees. We're at the other end of the spectrum, but I would agree with Ann and Bob that and I'll go 3 for 3 here. That the great this Great Resignation moment is real. For us, internally, we're seeing a positive impact because of folks who are maybe rethinking career pathways coming out of larger technology companies. So we are being very aggressive on the recruiting front today. And we are seeing maybe conversations that prior we didn't think we would be able to have with certain senior level or C-level folks who are kind of popping their head up and saying, yeah, we'd be interested in a high growth startup. So that's an interesting data point for maybe some of the smaller high growth companies out there. On the other side, we work with over 100 mid to large enterprises on workforce training. And I think that what I've noticed in the last few months is a urgency to get better at re-onboarding workers. I definitely have seen people double click on their training and development strategy and not look at it as just a check the box one and done, but start to realize continuous learning is real. Making sure our workforce is agile at continuously developing is important. So that's a positive data point. We're seeing companies start to take maybe their continuous learning more serious.
Interesting. So Sam, off the point, but just as a point of interest for me, I understand why Audible is named Audible. ADP is a venerable business, and automatic data process. I get that. How did you come up with the name? How did you come up with the name for your business?
Sure. The company was originally called Sales Huddle because our focus was on building stronger sales forces with workforce training. And here's a nod to Newark. We moved to Newark because of Newark Venture Partners. They were one of our early venture investors, also partnered with Audible. And when I moved to Newark, I realized that there's a lot of inequities in access to workforce training today. Sales reps get a lot of it, but maybe the frontline worker does not. And I only learned that by walking Broad Street and interacting in this community. So one huddle stands for every worker, full workforce, let everybody compete.
Good.
And so we've rallied around the number one.
Okay, cool. Now I get it. All right. Thank you very much. So as you guys know, NJPAC is a public-facing business, and our job demands, and it's a job we love, and that is being present in person for our patrons. Show can't go on. A live event has to get produced live by live folks. However, as we discovered during pandemic, there are functions in our business that can be handled from home. And so how has the pandemic handled how people go to work, in quotes, at your businesses? I'll start with Bob, please.
Thanks, John. Well, we've gone through, as you can imagine, just as every company went through this period in which we had to send everyone home. So just imagine, sort of the infrastructure that we needed to put in place to ensure that everybody could do their jobs remotely at the height of the pandemic, which was March a couple years ago. And what we found was that was a great strategy. We wanted to make sure that we took care of our associates and that they were safe and that they were also able to take care of clients. And that was really important for us, given the nature of our business. Having said that, I do think what we're seeing now is the fact that organizations are starting to bring people back into offices, and there's a rationale for it. Yes, there are some jobs and some functions that you can do remotely, but we can't forget that we're all social creatures. And while it sounds great to be able to work from home all the time, I think there's some habits that you develop that may not necessarily help further advance your culture of your organization. What we also found from some research was the fact that while many people got hired during the pandemic, they didn't have the same level of connectivity to their organization. So they didn't get, socialized into the culture of the company, which led to even, turnover during this period. So the important thing here is to say there is a solution somewhere in the middle in which we're never going to go back to, 5 days a week in the office for most organizations, but we're also not going to allow everyone to work from home. What you may see in the middle is some sort of flex or hybrid approach in which people are in the offices for periods of time. Culture is so important for the success of organizations, and particularly our organization, because we do believe in ensuring that we take care of our clients and the clients are our North Star, but you don't get that feeling when you're doing it remotely. You don't have the opportunity to reach out to your peer and ask a simple question while you're engaged in a conversation with the client. So the important part here is to say, how do we stay connected? How do we ensure that we advance the culture of the organization? And as we bring people into our family, that they're all understanding of our values and our principles and how we operate as an organization. I think that's really critical. So for us, you'll see some level of a flexible model. You'll see people who will have the opportunity to sort of work remotely for a period of time based on some, sort of tax statutes and the like. But I do think what you'll see is much more flexibility, particularly in our organization, much more flexibility than we thought about in the past.
Yeah, interesting. We find the same thing as well. I mean, there are certain jobs that allow for work from home, and in those situations, we now are flexible in ways we never would have imagined 2 years ago. In the old days, if somebody said to me, "I want to work from home 2 days a week," I wouldn't hire that person. So the world has turned 180 on that. And
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, that was a great full answer we just heard from Bob. And so I want to just add to it two thoughts. One is we talked about the Great Resignation. I love what Bob said about the Great Realignment. And I also want to add one more word, which is the Great Attraction, right? And I think that organizations that do wholly embrace this notion of hybrid work are going to be at the forefront of attracting others. Now, we really did see, per Sam's comments, that our, people that we hired with less than one tenure actually are leaving at higher rates than longer tenured employees, right? There is something about, reality about that, that chemistry that develops in person where people get to see and feel the culture being in the office. So what we've developed is a brand new approach to how we frame our Audible culture, and we're calling it Hub and Home. And essentially there are use cases, specific use cases of when work can be done at home, really the heads down work, your writing, your researching, even your sometimes your one-on-ones with your direct reports. But there are other use cases that we feel are best done in the office. So if it's brainstorming, PI planning for our tech teams, social events, all of the work that we do around Activate Caring. You can't engage with the Newark community and even with interns that we're bringing in unless you're really meeting with them in person. So what we've done is we said that all employees need to be in the office 1 to 3 days a week, but we've really decentralized and empowered each of our business leaders. Remember, Audible is tech, content, marketing, all the general, human resources, finance. There's so many different functions, and each one has a different mini culture and a way of working. So we wanted to really allow each of the business leaders to determine how many days their teams need to be in the office. And then we're going to test and learn over the next couple of months as we return. The last thing I wanted to share was we've actually physically reconfigured our offices. So the notion of people having permanent desks, we've set up neighborhoods. So teams can come back to their neighborhood, but there will be open desks. And we've really completely revamped all of our conference rooms. We've opened them up so they can be project rooms that can hold permanent project work with garage doors. And we've kind of we've created a new energy with the idea that the new wallpapers that were done by local Newark artists that are going to be all the different things that we could do to make people feel the energy and the culture of Audible when they're in our business, in our offices. So this is going to launch, by the way, April 11th. So we're really excited to welcome everybody back. Right now, we've just been having kind of a soft return.
That's wonderful. So, I am aware that Audible is the largest employer of actors on the East Coast, and a creator and producer of enormous volume of excellent content. How has the recording of Audible product changed during pandemic? I'm sure that content had to be recorded remotely, but are you bringing actors back to Newark now?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, first of all, it was a tremendous feat by our content team and our studios team to provide equipment to narrators and performers across the country. And we also kind of worked with local studios because people couldn't travel. But ultimately, we have a beautiful studio at One Washington in our headquarters. And our goal really is to continue to bring creators and narrators and actors and multicast actors back to the office. And I think they'll find a brand new campus feel between the Innovation Cathedral, One Washington, and what we're doing together with the city out in Washington Park. And I think this is very important. I just want to make the point that our creators love working with us because of our commitment to community, to spectrum and belonging, our reframing of DEI. And that's very, very important to us.
Great. And I would put a plug in for a piece of content that that got launched a couple of weeks ago with Mayor Baraka called The Book of Baraka, which is Mayor Baraka's Audible original. Sam, the question to you, and I'll repeat it because it's taken a minute to get to you on it, right? And that is functions in businesses can be handled at work, in person, or at home. And how has the pandemic altered the nature of how people go to work at One Huddle?
Sure. I think that first off, I love what Ann said about the hub and home and neighborhoods model, because I think that speaks to some of the things we've seen. As a small business, I do believe that being in person is critical for certain parts of the work we do every day for collaboration. I believe that we're already pretty equipped to operate remote, given that we were early stage and high growth and running all over the place in many ways. But what we've done is we've made the office sort of like the new offsite. And what I've tried to do is make it a place people want to come to without mandating. And for our, call it younger workforce, that's worked really well. We're not here 5 days a week. We're here 3, call it, everybody's here has crossover. But I think from a proactive perspective, instead of me mandating, I've taken the stance that let's make this a fun place. Let's find ways to group certain types of meetings on certain days that people will want to come in without being very careful about stepping into mandatory, because I think that triggers something different. But I do think that the office is in many ways sort of like the new offsite and can kind of be a showroom of sorts. We're going through a big hiring motion right now. And, we have made the choice that we're not, we're a hybrid environment. And we want to find the best people. We think it's important to be here. And, our team will work every day to make sure the culture is someplace like maybe to steal from Audible, like a neighborhood that you want to come to.
Yeah. Excellent. When you look at what employees want in a company, do generational differences emerge? Do entry-level employees, new and younger staff, have different needs than more venerable, established employees? Bob, I ask you first.
Well, John, this has always been an interesting question because we, in our workforce, we certainly have from baby boomers on down. And what you find is, there are just different stages of life. And so by default, they're all going to look for different things that they need, and particularly in our workforce, whereas things like, 401k match was a big deal for many baby boomers, but the younger generation may not see that as, a great perk. They may want more equity in the company. And so you have this interesting dynamic, and again, it's by generation, and different groups have different needs based on where they are in their career. Early career, folks have a tendency to want more cash, more pay, or more tenured folks will take more equity because they understand the advantages and disadvantages of it. So it really depends on the population and where they are in their career. Now, having said that, there are certainly things that are more important now than they were in the past. Things like mental health awareness. 10 years ago, no one talked about mental health. Or 5 years ago, no one talked about it. Now it's a very important part of what we have to talk about associates, when we have that sort of discussion. The other piece is about, are the benefits flexible enough to meet my specific needs? And I do think that, again, that varies based on where you are in your career and how the population views those things. So there are generational differences. There are needs that are different in our organization, and we see it all the time. And so I think the important thing for organizations like ours and others is to remain flexible and offer the right sort of benefits in more of a cafeteria style, if you will, such that you can pick and choose what you need, particularly as we, as I mentioned before, this is the age of the employee in which we've got to make sure we cater to them because there's such a great demand for associates. And now there's limited supply. Wages are going to go up, as we all know from Economics 101. In addition to that, you'll see that people want things that are very different and catered to their specific needs. So it's more about mass personalization is probably the way I would talk about it than anything else.
How do you, in a business as large as ADP with tens of thousands of employees, in my experience, I run a small business. We have a couple of hundred employees, and HR in my experience is like glass blowing. Every employee is different. The needs of each employee are unique. How do you address a thing like that, for example, at ADP?
Well, John, I'll be a bit facetious and say very carefully. It's probably the best way to start. I do think that, we've got at ADP a tremendous, total rewards organization. They do external research. They're always trying to stay ahead of the curve to say, what is it that associates want? And we, of course, do surveys internally, as you can imagine, to understand what the needs are and what people are requesting. And then we go out and try and figure out a way to sort of, appeal to, the largest part of the population. So I'm grateful that we have specialists in that field that understand the broader landscape. They understand what benefits we can offer and what we can't. And, believe it or not, it meets the majority of the needs, which is a great thing. And we're talking on a global scale as well. So we were one of the first organizations to offer, same-sex partner benefits. And so we've done things that other organizations took a little while to do, but we stepped up because we understood how important it was to our workforce. So I do believe that, large organizations have to remain flexible. They always have to be scanning the environment, both externally to understand what we can offer and also internally to see what associates are really asking for. And that's one of the things that we do. And we launch new benefits, pretty much every year we see a new sort of offering that we, give to our associates, whether it's healthy roads or, something similar to that to ensure that associates are taking care of their health, to on-site sort of, medical facilities, which is also fantastic for us. And so it really depends. And we continue to sort of learn and grow. And, there's never an end. It's almost like running on a treadmill. You can get off, you can stop, but, the treadmill keeps running for sure. So we'll continue to monitor that to say, how do we do this in the right way for our associates?
And let me ask you that question as well, because Audible is kind of unique in that you're a left brain, right brain business. You're a tech business,
Yes,
and you're a creative business. So how do you deal with it?
absolutely. And I think that's a great way of describing sort of our tech audience and then our content. I mean, our tech employees, our content employees. And I think one of the, I love where Bob focused in terms of sort of scanning the environment and understanding, what people want in terms of total rewards. We call it pick your perks, like what are the different perks that we're going to put out to employees. But I think there's something else we should also add to the conversation, which is, we learned in the crisis to stay true to our brand, right? And for Audible, it's listening and amplifying voices. And so we really started starting right at the beginning of the crisis, starting to put out, gosh, I can't forget the word. We would scan for what people are looking for. And we would listen to what they need. And what they really wanted early were two major things. One was this notion of meaning and purpose. During the crisis, the world there was sort of a Dadaism, existential crisis, like where are we going? And so people wanted to make sure they had meaning and purpose in their work, to log on every day and to engage. And so the idea of having frequent all hands where we brought all of our teams together to get a sense of team, but more importantly, to have the leadership team share the strategy, provide transparency into our mission and purpose and goals, so people could coalesce. So I think all generations, whether you're, a millennial or you're a baby boomer, you want to be engaging in work where you really feel like you're making a difference. So that was something that we truly amplified over the last 2 years, and we picked up the frequency of all hands, and we picked up the frequency of our surveys, the word that I couldn't get out a moment ago.
Got it.
And through these surveys, we got to understand, what people are looking for. And so the other piece is really in terms of meaning and purpose and knowing what their work is contributing to, they also want to have social purpose. So our people principles at Audible, which we live and breathe by, we have one which we're all very proud, and Don Katz, our founder and CEO, really drives home, is this notion of activate caring. So I think particularly for the new generation in the office, they're going to come back to work where they know that they can volunteer, they can engage in community activities, and we continue to be committed to that in NORC, whether it's working with local NORC artists, whether it's recruiting people who have been previously incarcerated or homeless. We work very closely with the Covenant House in NORC. The idea is our employees want to engage in a mean that's socially relevant. So I think you have, on the one hand, you have all your total rewards and perks that you need to be competitive, but you also internally have to provide a true mission that all generations are gonna grab onto. And I think particularly this younger generation is going to move where they feel that they're going to make an impact.
Fair enough. I think that's absolutely right. Sam, all that said about culture, workplace flexibility, how important is compensation? And that is competitive or increased compensation, or are there other ways that you attract talent?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for our workforce, compensation is, obviously, I think an important point. I think what's become more important over the last few years that I've noticed and just accelerated during COVID is, personal and professional development. At One Huddle, we during COVID, we kind of had this mantra: extra effort. It's going to require a little bit extra out of all of us. It's a little bit extra to get on a Zoom call instead of just walking into a meeting in a room together. So that we kind of rallied around extra effort. And one of the things that we got really rave reviews from our team on over the last 1+ years is a commitment to a weekly training table. We do it every Thursday training table here at One Huddle. It's 30 minutes. It's optional. We get 100% participation in it. And it's a different theme every week related to the business. One week it's mission. One week it may be how to handle an objection. One week it may be I have a customer drop in and talk to our team about the product. And I think that has been it's something extra that everybody has really appreciated, that we're taking time to think about what is the next step in your journey, either at One Huddle or beyond One Huddle. And the training and development piece, when we don't do it, like we've had weeks where we've had to pass on it because of conflict, and it's something people talk about. So I think personal and professional development is a biggie, and that is, compensation is always important, but I think that showing that I respect their professional and personal development has been something I've learned is really critical.
Interesting and useful. All right, folks, it's time for the bonus round. My colleague Val Blau is in the green room, and she's got questions from our viewers. Val, what's question number one?
Great. Question number one is from Warren Trinquata. I understand why employees are rethinking and making different choices. That makes sense. But we have also seen an increase in what would traditionally be considered, quote, bad behavior and burning bridges. For example, ghosting interviews, leaving without notice, unreasonable demands, etc. If employers are seeing this behavior, what is causing this change in the civil relationship between employers and employees?
Bob, you want to take that first?
Thanks, John. Yeah, I was hoping for the layup question. You gave me the 3-point question, so I think do I get credit for the degree of difficulty with answering this one? Is that
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. But, no,
well?
I know you,
Listen,
Bob, you can do it. I know you got it. You got this, yeah.
well, that's a very interesting question, Warren, and I appreciate it for sure. I think part of the challenge is, yes, you will see some bad actors. What I've learned is bad behavior is learned somewhere, and so they may have seen it in some other environment and assume that that was okay. There's this need, and this is a broader comment, and it applies to society in general, about the return of civility. We've got to be civil with each other. And the worst thing that you can do is burn bridges in an organization. And I often tell people that the world is a very small place and life is short. Invariably, you will run across some of the same people again. And I can, just give you a very quick story. I was on a call yesterday as we were discussing sort of some new research we did, the ADP Research Institute did about this idea of being connected to your organization. And lo and behold, on the call, I get pinged afterwards, and there's a young lady that I worked with 20 plus years ago. And so it just goes to show you that the world is a small place. So when you behave poorly like that and you leave the organization in a way that is not professional, well, that says a lot about your own personal brand. And it's important for you to ensure that you are thinking about your future and the people and the relationships that you might run into. I think it's unprofessional, quite frankly, and I'll be very candid about it, that there's a way to leave an organization such that people say they did things the right way. And I think that's really important because you never know whose path you're going to cross again, who's going to be an investor in your company if you are a startup, who might have influence over your future and your career that you may not recall, but someone knows someone. So make the assumption that the world is very connected and it's a very small place. And once you burn a bridge, you'll wind up seeing sort of the people running off of that bridge towards you again. So I would just say it's important to do things the right way, regardless of the circumstances. Always try and lead from the front and do it in a manner and a construct that says, I'm a professional, it didn't work out, I'm going to do the right thing and exit appropriately.
Yeah, excellent, great answer. Ann, do you have a take on that?
Yeah, I wanted to add, we were just looking at our employee relation cases and over the last 2 years. And I just want to highlight that we talk about bad behavior. We've actually seen a huge improvement in behavior in that we've seen much less employee relations cases. And, I think we kind of chuckle to ourselves. It's because people aren't with each other. Like there seems to be a better protocol online. And then when people are together in the office, that can actually abet worse behavior. So I just wanted to make that point that we've actually seen a different trend. In terms of people exiting the organization, going back to Sam's comment about people leaving not necessarily for comp, but they're looking for education. One thing I can also say is that there is some bad behavior going on right now as it relates to comp. And bad behavior, maybe this is a generational, I'm a boomer, so maybe I see it differently. But we have something called Slack, where people are posting ranges for compensation that they're uncovering through the compensation process. And there's also a new app called Blind that a lot of our employees are going to, and people are posting their comp for their role. So the transparency is more than ever. Now, from a generational perspective, that's a very different point of view. They really do share their comp. Older generations don't. And the last point I'll make is people who leave for comp. We have been seeing a trend of boomerangs where people have left for higher comp, realize they've gone to cultures that are not as good or fulfilling than what they left. And even within my own people and places team, I've rehired 4 people in the last 6 months who left and then come back. Yeah. So not that it's bad behavior just to leave for comp, because I get it. We all want to further our lives. But I think people should not just leave for compensation. That is not good behavior. You need to leave for the right reasons. So I just wanted to highlight that in the context of this conversation.
Cool. Sam, do you have a take on that?
You got 2 great answers there. I'll maybe repeat my last one on extra effort. Slack, I think that for our younger workers, it's really easy to text, email, and Slack things instead of have a conversation about them. And my team notoriously knows I'm not slacking you back. So it's encouraged more face-to-face conversation, which has uncovered more feelings that I can, have conversations with in real time. And it's obviously been a difficult moment over the last 2 years. So that I'm not doing that to be just, a challenger. Just trying to find those opportunities to get face-to-face and have conversations is, maybe caught some, uncomfortable feelings a little earlier that otherwise would have brewed if it just happened via, Slack or text or email or any one of those other platforms.
Half of which I've never heard of as an aging boomer. I'm not sure I want to know about them, so there's that. At NJPAC, for the first time, we're doing a company-wide pay equity survey so that we can be sure that our team members are being paid fairly and consistently. That's a new thing for us as a medium-sized nonprofit, and I think it'll be useful. Val, question number 2, please.
Yes. From an anonymous attendee, how do companies build culture in a remote environment? It feels as if work has become more transactional now that everything is remote.
Maybe Anne, would you take that first?
Sure. It's a great question. And, again, I took over our real estate team about 4 years ago, and I never really understood the inextricable link between people and places. So we really relied very much on the physical reality of our workplaces to help drive culture and send messages through iconography, through interactions. So we did our best over the last 2 years, and I think rather successfully, to continue to drive culture by doing a few things. I mentioned we do a lot of listening and a lot of surveying, and those surveys told us what people needed. So we did things like the all hands that I mentioned. A lot of our leaders started doing like coffee chats, like just open forums, inviting people, because you didn't have those casual, encounters at the proverbial water cooler, at the coffee center, or picking up your lunch. So we wanted to have spaces where people could come together and just ask questions of their leaders, ask questions of each other. So coffee chat, and I used to call mine coffee talk. I grew up in New Jersey. So let's do some coffee talk and let's get real. I also think it was important, and we're working with Sam in One Huddle right now to make sure that we're onboarding our people in a better way. And we are really working to not only help drive culture through continuous onboarding. So there's the day 1 and day 2, but we would check in within 2 weeks. We would have kind of reunions where we would invite new employees to come together and ask questions. We're going to have quizzes to help people. We're going to be sharing videos and some historical, work that we've done. When we celebrated our 20th anniversary, we put together a history video, but really trying to get kind of artifacts, whether they're videos or articles or, recordings of major events, and then kind of quiz our people in a fun and engaging way. We also have something called Listening Tuesdays, where we invite our creator talent. For example, you asked the question earlier, but Deepak Chopra just did a Audible original for us, very much thinking about mental health. And so we invited him to come and speak with employees, give a small presentation, and then have interactions. So engaging with our creative talent, engaging with each other. And then the last thing I would say that was super helpful during the pandemic and helping to drive culture has been our employee resource groups, which we call our impact groups. And they've been another very important channel for employees to express themselves within an accepting community and create that sense of belonging. And what I love about all of our impact groups, whether it's our Black Employee Network or LB, our Pride team, is that it's not just that community showing up on their events. So many people, white, straight men, and everybody are joining in. And I think that helps to drive and create culture. And I could share other ideas in terms of Wellness Fridays, but there's things that we've done to pull people together.
Great. Sounds really useful and community and culture building. Sam?
Yeah, for us, it's having a common language, I think, is more important than ever. And I think for maybe, Bob and Ann, who their brands have thought about this, for years and have really dialed in the words and terminology and core values and standards that matter most. For us, it really forced us to almost lean into those standards and our mission, even more, and talk about them. We did an exercise last year where we had, we have a set of 10 core values, and I realized I never actually took them down to definition. So we took one of our core values every month and rapped on it together, and our team defined it and we agreed on it. So I think leaning into terminology, because remote, you can't, if you chase 5 rabbits, you might not even catch one. Too much messaging is chaotic. Just kind of trying to lean into a few things was important.
Bob, you have the last word.
Thanks, John. Well, listen, first and foremost, I will tell you, it's very difficult to maintain culture in a remote work environment, particularly for those who are just joining your teams. And so I often encourage people that if you do want to advance in an organization, it's important to sort of make connections. Culture is about people. It's about understanding the standards and expectations of your organization. But make no mistake, it's a people component that's really important here too. A few things that we do, even in a remote world, because we do have associates that are spread out across the globe. One is we're a values-driven organization, and I think about the important values to me that I often tell people I have accountability for is that each person counts, which ties to our view of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and corporate social responsibility. We have other values, of course, that are important, but those two are really important to me, and I feel like the caretaker of those two values. In addition to that, our approach to leadership is fairly unique. As many of you know, we acquired the Marcus Buckingham Company several years ago, and Marcus brought a concept to us that we bought into, which was called Standout. And it gave leaders and their associates an opportunity to check in, because we do believe that the team leader, number one, is a curator of that team's culture. Number two, if the team leader pays attention to his or her people, they will in turn sort of respond. So paying attention to them, and we have these things called check-in to say, how do you check in to understand what your team member is working on and what you need them to work on? So there's a little bit of negotiation about prioritization. In addition to that, just making sure that people are seen, valued, and heard. That's the way you sort of continue to build culture. And once people are sort of indoctrinated, if you will, with your culture, it's also important, then you can say, all right, we can continue to build culture while they're remote, because they understand the principles of the organization, they understand the purpose of the organization, and how they've built a network of people that they can tap into at any given point in time. So this idea of being connected is really important. And I think we continue to do that, whether you're remote or in person, or in a hybrid work environment.
Thank you. Thanks a million. I want to thank each of you for such thoughtful comments about this time in our lives that we are so kind of carefully trying to navigate. You all have shown, I think, each in your businesses flexibility and empathy and creativity and nimbleness at a time that I have observed and felt to be a remarkably anxious and unpredictable one. So what you do is really, really important. And thanks for advancing a positive culture at each of your businesses and sharing your wisdom with us. We all learned something this morning. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. I am happy to tell you that our next Business Partners Roundtable will be in person, and that will be for the first time since February 2020. My guest will be Megan Myungwon Lee, who is the chairwoman and CEO of Panasonic Corporation of North America. I can see that big, beautiful building outside my window, and it'll be fun to talk with her one-on-one. We'll announce that date shortly. And I'm also happy to tell you that we're going to be launching a series of networking nights for all of our business partners, who we are so grateful to. This will be after work cocktails and conversation at our Nico Kitchen and Bar, which I'm happy to also report has got a 4.5 or 4.6 on Open Table. So it's a pretty good restaurant. So we'll give you those dates soon, and I hope you'll join us. Until then, stay safe, stay well, and Godspeed. Appreciate it.
Thank you.